Alright, for the Revolution of 1848, Part 2, we'll look at Germany. Now, first off, Germany had a severe lack of unification. Essentially, the last time that Germany was ruled by one ruler was the time of Charlemagne, in which we're looking back all the way to the 700s, including 800s with his sons. Now, at the time when a ruler dies at that period of time, his land is then disseminated to his sons equally. So after Charlemagne's death, they are going to be divided up with his three sons. Uh, One of those sons is going to rule a southern section, getting close to Italy. Um, but then you also have a son ruling over what we now call Germany, and another son ruling over what we now call France. The son in the southern section, he is going to be taken out by his brothers for his territory, so that's going to leave two different groups. One that rules France, and of course one that rules Germany. Now, from that point onward, that territory is going to be split up and conquered by other groups of people. For example, the Holy Roman Empire, the Austrians, and the German states are going to be split into many different mini-states. For example, in the medieval period, it was split up into about 300 mini-states. Now, there are going to be German rulers in that territory that are going to try to unite all these German states. Some of them are going to be somewhat successful. For example, Frederick Barbarossa. But they're not able to unify all the German states, and usually after their reign, it falls to pieces once again. At the same time, you are having groups of people who see it advantageous to actually make sure that Germany does not unite. Groups like the British, the French, the Austrians, as well as the Italians. And so you have all these different groups fighting amongst themselves, but also ensuring that Germany does not unite. So as a result, there's a long history of Germany not being a Germany, or a united Germany. Fast forwarding all the way to the year of 1848, now we have the current ideologies of nationalism, conservatism, liberalism, and socialism. With these ideas, and certainly with the revolutions, the American, the French, the time of Napoleon. Napoleon did conquer the area of Germany. He did spread some of those ideas to the Germans. And so now they have some context of what that may mean. And many of the Germans are coming up with ideas that maybe they want a piece of that pie. So, at 1848, they are also having severe problems with food. Industrialization has come to the German states, and that has certainly caused some social issues. But also, there are many farmers who have gone to the cities. They work in these factories. They've pushed out other industries, and there are quite a bit of a problem with industrialization. So, with the poor harvests that have gone on in Germany at the same time, 1845, 1846, 47, leading up to 1848, the Germans start to protest very much in the same manner that the French were, and they were watching what the French were doing. They, after all, were the closest context to revolution that they had, and so they replicated essentially those protests, and they would ask for certainly some aid with food, but also what they wanted was some compensation, some support by the governments for those unemployed, and they also wanted universal suffrage. Now, this is a little bit different than what's going on in France, because France wants universal male suffrage. What the Germans want is men and women to have the right to vote, own property, free speech, and all that good stuff. Now, they start protesting. They go to Berlin, and keep in mind the German states are under jurisdictions of outside powers. So, for example, Prussia owns a bit of some of the German states, and Austria owns a bit of the German states. So many of these protesters go to Berlin, which we are now in the Prussian jurisdiction, and they start protesting and barricading the streets for these demands. As a result, King Frederick William IV is going to send troops. Those troops open fire on these protesters. About 250 protesters are going to die. And what this does is it causes a lot of common concern with the Prussians as well as the Germans, and it actually intensifies these protests instead of putting a stop to it, which is what rulers are used to when they send an army to shoot a bunch of protesters. So what King Frederick William does is he summons an assembly to reform and reconstruct a Prussian constitution. So it looks like a victory for the liberals. With this formation of a constitution, this comes about with the ideas of the Germans to also form their constitution. And so what gets started is the Frankfurt Parliament in May of 1848. 800 middle-class individuals from all of the German states come together, and they start to form their own constitution. What they want and what they draw up is that there is equality for all German people under the law, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, as well as free speech. Now when it comes to the idea of universal suffrage, they are not inclined to think on that. In fact, they don't even want full male suffrage. They see full male suffrage as a threat because the poor can now vote and have a voice in whatever assembly they have. They see that as dangerous. Also, they start offering protections for the artists. They saw that artists were kind of pushed out with this industrialization and this industrial movement. And so what happens is this Frankfurt Parliament does not really have any support by the local people. The crux of the problem, which is missed by the Germans, is that they needed help with food. They also wanted some sort of compensation for the unemployed, and they wanted universal suffrage. They did not accomplish any of that. So as a result, they do not have the support of the common people or the wealthy individuals. Now some of the wealthy are completely excited about the outplay of this Frankfurt Parliament because it means that basically the German states aren't going to grow in any more power, and more or less everything is kept the same. The last avenue for this Frankfurt Parliament is to offer basically Frederick William IV, the King of Prussia, the crown for the German states, and he rejects it. He doesn't want it. He sees this as not a serious group, and so as a result he rejects the German crown. But this is a wake-up call for him, saying that these liberal assemblies that have been cropping up in the German states, as well as the Prussian state, is a threat to his power. They might be getting a bit too ambitious, and so what he does, he starts breaking up these assemblies, clamping down, making laws that these assemblies cannot form, and so as a result, this sort of movement dies fairly quickly in 1848. But what it does do is it allows for this idea of a unified German state, which is certainly going to be important, and the Frankfurt Parliament does get the ball rolling for Germans to think themselves as their own people and not subjects of Prussia or Austria or some other power. So what's going to happen after this revolution in 1848, certainly when we get closer to the 1860s and 70s, will be the start of the movement and a concrete movement towards a unified German state. So there is some benefits coming out of this, but it certainly isn't going to be the last and final chapter in German unification.